January has seen a series of the deadliest attacks by the Taliban and ISIS combined in Afghanistan. 140 people have been killed and the sense of fear is unparalleled. Our lead report tonight details the horror Kabul has witnessed in the last week alone.
These are hardly the first attacks in Afghanistan, but there is something particularly alarming about the scale. It's been a bloody week to say the least, with civilians bearing the brunt of intensified Taliban and ISIS offensives in Afghanistan. It all started last Monday when Taliban fighters stormed the tightly guarded Intercontinental hotel in Kabul and sparked a firefight that lasted more than 14 hours. 22 people were killed at the end of the siege. Just 2 days later, Islamic State terrorists attacked the Jalalabad office of British charity Save the Children, killing 4 people. The organisation has since suspended all operations in the country. Then on Saturday came one of the deadliest attacks ever witnessed in Afghanistan. The Taliban packed an ambulance with explosives, drove it to a hospital in central Kabul and set off an explosion that rocked the Afghan capital. 103 people were killed and more than 200 wounded. On Monday, 5 ISIS terrorists targeted a military base in Kabul, killing 11 soldiers and capping a week of violence that has shaken a country already ravaged by years of conflict. The fact that a military base in the centre of Kabul was vulnerable to a terror attack raises questions over the Afghan government's ability to protect its people. And anger is growing on the streets. The unrelenting violence underscores the frustrating reality in Afghanistan. Despite 16 years of fighting by the US-led coalition and Afghan forces, the Taliban and other terror groups are only growing stronger. The Taliban has claimed 2 of the attacks that took place in the last 1 week. Yet US President Donald Trump says his government will not negotiate with the terror group.
I don't see any talking taking place. I don't think we're prepared to talk right now. It's a whole different fight over there. They're killing people left and right. Innocent people are being killed left and right. Bombing in the middle of children, in the middle of families, bombing, killing all over Afghanistan. So we don't want to talk with the Taliban.
Today, the Taliban controls about a third of Afghanistan. That's more territory than at any point since the US intervention. A look at this map tells you how widespread the Taliban's hold really is. Across a large chunk of southern Afghanistan, in the opium-growing provinces of Kandahar, Helmand and Nimroz, the Taliban control vast sections of the countryside. They are also dominant in parts of the adjoining Faryab province. They are uncontested in at least 2 western parts of Faryab and Badghis, and hold pockets in other provinces in the east and the north. With a fragile and fractured government in place, other terror groups like the Islamic State have also gained a foothold in Afghanistan. After losing land in Iraq and Syria, ISIS is settling in well in Afghanistan, Pakistan and Central Asia, and working at reviving the idea of the Islamic Caliphate. With the Taliban claiming 2 of last week's attacks and ISIS saying it is behind the other 2, it appears that the 2 groups are in a brutal race to unleash maximum damage in Afghanistan. At the end of the day, the sense among Afghans is that no one is safe. Bureau Report, WION.
Why now and what had happened to trigger 4 attacks in the same month are being asked. Afghanistan watchers say the attacks reflect a multiplicity of players, each competing with the other and each competing to draw fighters into this theatre in Afghanistan and adherence to their cause. They're also competing for funding. Here's how the players stack up on the ground according to the Independent Afghanistan Analysts Network. Groups linked to the Islamic State are getting active. The Taliban has split into 4 groups. A Pakistani Taliban has declared allegiance to Islamic State. Other Taliban groups are competing with the Islamic State, and in this competition, civilian lives clearly do not matter. What's critical here is whose action endears them to the donors. Money is the key. So every attack on a target linked to the government merits points. How does this work? Territory seized or captured is a big plus. According to the Taliban Analysts Network, when it comes to money, the Islamic State appears to have the edge here. They're paying better salaries and so are able to attract experienced, battle-hardened Taliban commanders. The next question is, where is all this money coming from? It is hardly as a surprise that most of these groups are based in Pakistan. So clearly they operate from Pakistani territory with the Pakistani army or frontier constabulary looking the other way. More interesting, according to the Afghan Analyst Network, the attacks follow a pattern where Pakistan reacts or gets certain groups to strike when it is criticized internationally. In that sense, President Donald Trump's description of Pakistan as practicing lies and deceit and the suspension of over $2 billion in assistance has been a stinging slap. Pakistan has lost serious face and it's trying to make up in this manner. But the Pakistanis may have been smarting for some time now. Recall that in December 2017, only a month back, the attack on a Shia cultural center in Kabul left 41 people dead. Many of them were children. It marked a major sectarian escalation since, until now, Kabul had been largely free of such attacks. Local media reports named the Islamic State as the perpetrator. Incidentally, sectarian killings or attacks on Shias are a normal pattern in Pakistan. It has been sending many signals to Washington. They do not want to be pitted against the US in Afghanistan, but they will not stop supporting terror groups, which they see as vital tools of their national security strategy. So that is why the spurt of attacks in Kabul. We've seen graphic images from Syria of adults and children struggling to breathe after a sarin gas attack. It's happened repeatedly. Global superpowers and even the United Nations have called out the Syrian government, but the Assad regime denies it all. Now there's fresh evidence linking the Syrian government's chemical weapons stockpile to the largest sarin gas attack in the country. Take a look.
The Syrian government has so far denied claims that it used sarin on its citizens. But an investigation by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons has uncovered more evidence to expose the Assad government. Laboratory tests confirm that there is a link between Syrian chemical weapons and the 3 chemical attacks in Ghouta, Idlib and Aleppo. Scientists working for the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons compared samples taken by a UN mission from Ghouta. They found that traces of sarin from the samples of the 3 attacks match. This latest report will embarrass the Bashar al-Assad government. Back in 2013, the Syrian government had joined the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Under a US-Russia deal after the attack in Ghouta, the Assad government had agreed to permanently eliminate its chemical weapons program. These fresh disclosures come amid the ongoing Russia-sponsored peace dialogue in Sochi. Key stakeholders and global powers have already decided to boycott the talks. Assad's opponents have also refused to attend the Sochi dialogue. While Russia continues to stand behind the Assad regime, Washington is still critical of Moscow. A week ago, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said that Russia's failure to remove chemical weapons from Syria violates the 2013 agreement. American authorities point at the numbers put out by the Syrian American Medical Society. They have recorded 194 chemical attacks from Syria since 2012.
The recent laboratory tests put the Syrian government in a very difficult spot. There are 2 options now. The first option is that the government knew what was going on the ground and they tried to hide the fact that the army was using chemical weapons against enemies and against the civilian population. The second option is that the government did not know, which means that there are branches, parts of the army, of the Syrian army, acting against the willing or without the government knowing. Both these 2 options are highly problematic, and it will take a huge effort from the Syrian president's side to explain to the world why the chemical agents used in the chemical attacks, for instance in Khan Sheikhoun, for instance in Eastern Ghouta, are the same, exactly the same as the ones that his army had in the many warehouses in Syria. Daniele Pagani from Amman, Jordan, for WION.
And Daniele Pagani is in fact joining us live from Amman in Jordan. Good evening, Daniele. What more do we know about the findings of this report and the response, more importantly, from Damascus? Also, how does it affect Mr. Assad beyond giving him more bad press?
Good evening to you, Palki. What we know so far is that the findings are pretty much strong, because especially they focused on a stabilizer. I would not go too much into the chemical details, but this very stabilizer is strictly connected with the Syrian production of the sarin gas. So it has been found that the remains of the bombs used in the 2013 chemical attacks happened in Eastern Ghouta, which, remember, is the deadliest gas chemical attack since the massacre of Halabja in 1988 committed by Saddam Hussein's army back then against the Kurdish population. So the stabilizer markers of these stabilizers were found there in Eastern Ghouta, then they were found in Khan Sheikhoun. They match all together, and they match with the samples that the Syrian government provided to the United Nations during the investigation. So this is pretty much a strong evidence. There is a chemical link, which is very difficult to discuss, very difficult to doubt. There is a chemical link between what Syria had in its warehouses and what killed hundreds of civilians in Eastern Ghouta and in Khan Sheikhoun later on. So this is what we know so far. These results were not made public in October, when the first report of the United Nations came out, because they said it was not their mandate to investigate precisely on this link. But now they have been made public, and the Syrian government will have a tough time to make the world understand how is it possible. Because, as I said, we have several options. One option is they didn't know. The other option is someone was using this without them knowing. The other option is that they bombed the warehouse, but they should have known where their warehouses was. So whatever the option, it's problematic for Assad, and it does affect surely its image. But I think there are now the legal extremes to proceed against them in an international court.
In a few hours from now, Donald Trump will deliver his first State of the Union address to give his country and perhaps the whole world more insights into Washington's foreign and economic policies. Building on the theme of a safe, strong and proud America, Trump has invited the widow of Indian engineer Srinivas Kuchibhotla, who was shot dead in a hate crime, for this address. The next report takes a closer look at what to expect from it.
The United States is open for business, Trump told the world at Davos last week. America first does not mean America alone, he insisted. Trump will take to the podium again, this time for his maiden State of the Union address to both houses of the U.S. legislature. So, what should America and the world expect from Trump's speech? Here's what he told reporters.
It's a big speech, an important speech. We cover immigration, and for many years, they've been talking immigration. They never got anything done. We're going to get something done. We hope it's got to be bipartisan, because the Republicans really don't have the votes to get it done in any other way. So it has to be bipartisan, but hopefully the Democrats will join us, or enough of them will join us, so we can really do something great for DACA and for immigration generally. But it's going to be, I think, a very important speech on trade. The world has taken advantage of us on trade for many years. And as you probably noticed, we're stopping that, and we're stopping it cold, and we have to. We have to have reciprocal trade. It's not a one-way deal anymore. So we have a lot of things to discuss, and we'll be discussing them, and I hope you enjoy it.
When it is the American president, what he says is important, no doubt. But what he does not say will equally be important. Besides domestic issues and the economy, Trump can be expected to dwell on North Korea, Iran, Russia, the Indo-Pacific and terrorism. All issues that have confronted successive American presidents, including Trump's immediate predecessor.
Our foreign policy has to be focused on the threat from ISIS and al-Qaeda. But it can't stop there. For even without ISIS, even without al-Qaeda, instability will continue for decades in many parts of the world. In the Middle East, in Afghanistan and parts of Pakistan, in parts of Central America and Africa and Asia. Some of these places may become safe havens for new terrorist networks.
Also expect some opposition lawmakers to boycott the event and some others to register their own protest by inviting immigrants who have been at the receiving end of Trump's attention. Bureau Report, WION.
And we'll be covering it live here. Stay tuned for the most comprehensive coverage of Trump's State of the Union address starting 7 a.m. Wednesday, only on WION.